So in this segment, we're going to be talking about UK beet grower fears over Brexit. So what's happened is these are beets that they produce. They use these to produce sugar, and what they are fearful of are massive imports of sugar from other countries, specifically Australia, but also I think the US and Brazil, who are very well known for their sugar production as well. So the UK farmers are really fearing kind of competition from other countries. These men genuinely thought they would keep the single market, at least some of them thought they would keep the single market, but also be able to compete with other countries exports wise, but instead they've lost their single market and have to compete with cheaper imports from other countries. The dramatic irony of the situation. Oh, it's just too much sometimes. So this company here in Norfolk, they produce half the county's sugar needs, but expect new trade deals to make their situation tougher because now they're going to have to compete. In a field in Norfolk, the sight of lush green leaves sprouting from the soil are giving farmer Ed Lankfer, I'm going to say, cause for optimism. I think this is one of the best crops we have ever grown, he says, surveying one of the fields of sugar beet. So what he's saying is they've actually had a good harvest this year. But it's not all rosy in the farm. Sugar beet has been grown on Lankfer's 225 hectare family farm in the village of Wareham since his grandfather first introduced it in 1928, alongside other crops. However, recent years of falling prices, coupled with risks from weather and disease, have made farmers questioning whether there is a future in growing it. Also, the loss of the EU subsidies as well. I'm sure that would be fairly scary. But point being is that farming is not a guarantee. You can do everything right and then some bad weather, pests could come in and ruin everything. This is before growers feel the impact of the post-Brexit trade deals with large sugar producers such as Australia. It's a concern for Lankfer, whose land is in International Trade Secretary Liz Truss' constituency. He has twice hosted her at the farm to answer questions. So this guy is in Liz Truss' constituency. Now, the question is, he's most likely voted for the Tories because he's hosted her at the farm. So he's openly invited her in to answer questions. So they must have some sort of connection. What I'd say to this geezer is, look, man, are you going to keep voting for people who have destroyed your farm, essentially? They've made your crop that you grow pointless through Brexit and through the aggressive policies they've taken regarding trade deals, which do more damage to the country than good. And the question I'm going to ask the gentleman is, if you keep voting Tory, then you deserve whatever problems you get when it comes to farming. But if you decide to wake up and actually vote for someone else, I might have an ounce of respect for you. British farmers hail sugar beet for its role in crop rotation. So generally, you don't want to keep growing the same crops or similar ones over and over again, because what it does is it wears out the land, and it makes sort of crop growing much more difficult. So what they do is something called crop rotation, where they'll grow, say, I don't know, like carrots at one point, and then they'll rotate and they'll use, like, say, sugar beets, and they might go back to carrots, or they might have a third one in there, and then it'll go back to the original one, if that makes sense. So it rotates. It's a good break crop and it spreads the workload over the winter, said Lankfer. The destination of his beet is visible from the field itself at nearby Wissington, where it's processed, eventually ending up in products such as Coca-Cola and Cadbury's chocolate, or bagged and sold to customers under the Silver Spoon brand. So you can see the Coca-Cola factory right there. So I don't know if the process would be they will take the sugar beets directly to the Coca-Cola factory, or if there's a third party involved. But it's very close to the point where you can see it from his farm, which tells you how kind of close-knit this kind of industry is, I suppose, at least from this farmer's point of view, that it literally just goes there, like up the road, to be processed. The processing site is owned by British Sugar, a subsidiary of Primark's owner, Associated British Food, which is really weird. Like, you own Primark, but also you produce sugar. Like, what? The company is in a powerful position. It is the sole customer of the UK farmers' crop. So what that means is this guy can charge a much lower price because he's the only purchaser of the sugar beet. So they're reliant on him. So he can essentially lowball them because he's the only buyer. Many consumers who drink fizzy drinks or eat sweet treats, like myself, unfortunately I eat too many of those, may not realise that beet farms located all over the eastern England, across swathes of East Anglia up into Lincolnshire, produce enough to cover half the UK's annual consumption of close to 2 million tonnes. So the sugar I've just dumped in my coffee probably comes from there. The remainder comes from overseas beet or cane, meaning any reduction in British output would increase reliance on imports. So that's probably already happening now because of the fact that there's a massive issue with in the agriculture industry, not enough workers to pick the fruits and vegetables. So most likely that's already happening, that we're going to have to import more sugar from abroad anyways. Tate and Lyle, the company which was a prominent supporter of Brexit, and their story makes a lot of sense here, only processes imported raw sugarcane, mostly from the tropics, which arrives by ship at its huge factory beside the Thames in East London. Like the villain Voldemort in the Harry Potter books, some beet farmers refuse to mention that name, grumbling about how Tate and Lyle products are branded with a Union Jack by virtue of being processed and packaged, but not grown in the UK, which is a bit ironic that they put the British flag on it, even though the products are imported and they don't have to do that. So it is a bit of irony, but I remember when I saw, I think it was like carrots or something, it said like packed in the UK, like with the British kind of Union Jack or whatever on it, but it says grown in Spain. Like, who are you trying to kid, pal? Like, what is this? Imported raw sugarcane is often cheaper than British or European produced beet, but domestic sugar producers were protected by quotas and subsidies during the UK's EU membership. So what you can see from this is that there were massive subsidies from the EU to farms to prop them up, to help them, but also quotas, which meant that there were limits on the amount we could actually import from abroad without them potentially being blocked off, so we wouldn't be able to import more, or they would face very aggressive tariffs. So while tariffs restricted the amount of cane imported, so what they would do is say you stick a 90% tariff on something and it's not viable as an import because it's not worth the money to import it. Which goes some way of explaining Tate and Lyle's pro-Brexit stance, because what they want to do is to be able to import more sugarcane and beet from other countries. So what that means is by supporting Brexit and the Tory party, they would get that through the UK-Australia deal, a UK-Brazil deal potentially, or say a UK-US deal. So that's kind of the goal of Tate and Lyle. So they've actually got a plan here with regards to Brexit. So they're one of the few industries who actually knew what they were doing, which is ridiculous. So it goes on to say 1-year contract prices for sugar beets are agreed between British Sugar and the NFU, which have been in steady decline for most of the last decade. So this system that we have here, where it's just based on year-to-year contracts, means it's incredibly volatile. The prices, you might get an incredibly high, a higher price if supply is low. For example, if there's massive weather problems, or if supply is very high, you might get a low price because there's more supply to quell the demand. Having peaked at just under £32 a tonne in 2014, the price has slumped to around £20 a tonne in the past few years, which is a bit cheap, isn't it? £20 for a tonne of sugar, is that not? Or £32 for a tonne of sugar? I would have thought that's quite cheap. But yeah, you can see that the price has gone down by a third, and that's going to impact a lot of these beet farmers who would be, I'm assuming, creating more than a tonne of sugar or beet. Amid mounting pressures, some beet farmers are calling time on the crop. Many growers are now talking about what they call beyond beet. And unfortunately, we think with the new market dynamics, the industry will get smaller in the future. So what you're going to see is Britain, again, being far more reliant on imports from other countries, which I thought, that wasn't what Brexit was about. It was meant to strengthen kind of our position in the single market, whilst also creating more opportunities for British farmers. All that's happened is they've lost their main market, and they have... they're going to face decimation. They're going to have to grow other stuff now. And the problem is, the more trade deals we do with other countries, the more exports, the more things that are going to be imported by the country, cheaper imports wise. If you do deals with, say, Brazil, we're going to import more sugarcane. For example, if we do a deal with the US, we might start importing more corn and things like that, which are going to decimate more and more local British industries, to the point where farming just won't be viable anymore because it's all going to be imported, or the vast majority will be imported, which is just really bad for the environment. To be honest, it's disastrous for the environment as we import more things. But that's the way it is right now, and it's unfortunate for these farmers who really need to look in the mirror after they voted for Brexit. And I assume a lot of them voted for the Tories. They need to figure out what they're going to do next, because they might go under. They might really go under. So, after the last harvest, Peck decided he had enough. I went to one of our farms, 600 acres of beet. At the end, we lost £12,000 even. I stood there and thought, I've been here, I worked really hard. I had the men working 15-hour days in the cold and the wet, and we lost all that money. So after all that, he lost 12 Gs. Peck sold his sugar beet machinery and is now concentrating on other, more profitable crops such as oats, which are increasingly popular for non-dairy milk, which is, oats are very popular, especially porridge, and as people move towards sort of more kind of vegan options for milk. So not the worst idea in the world, but if everyone starts moving towards oats, it will start lowering the price for that, as more supply will quell the demand. Even if beet prices improve, growers are fearful of the prospect of Australian sugar flooding the market as a result of the trade deal, because that's going to absolutely decimate them once again. Beet farmers feel they have been overlooked but expect to be affected just as much as sheep, cattle farmers located predominantly in Wales and Scotland. And the question these farmers need to ask themselves is, they have been overlooked as an industry. Agri-foods has been looked over as an industry, which shows you that the government doesn't care about them. So the question is, are these guys going to do anything about it, or are they just going to sit on their hands and be like, oh, maybe I'll just maybe grow something else, or maybe I'll just sell up at this point. You guys I thought farmers were to be proud people who feed the nation, but clearly there's not an ounce of sane pride amongst you at all. If this was happening to the French, man, we wouldn't hear the end of it. There'd be all sorts of protesting and things, but it just shows you how kind of passive and submissive some British people are. Domestic growers feel unable to compete with the scale of Australian farms because they have massive mega farms which export a lot of stuff to predominantly China, I think. And that's one of the other issues comes. Back in Norfolk, Langford doesn't plan to stop growing sugar beet, though his recent meetings with Truss only went some way to allaying his concerns. She explains herself well, which, she's a great spin merchant. She also seems a bit crazy, but, we'll leave that for another day. But after the meeting, there were lots of what ifs. What if Australia falls out with China, which they are on the verge of doing, by the way. I think there is some sort of trade war going off down under. And then Australia floods our market, which could happen with sugar, because if Australia lose China as an export market, they're going to be looking at, all right, what's our possible options? Well, we've got a trade deal with the UK. Let's send most of the stuff we would have sent to China over to the UK, because they've got a lot of stuff produced. It needs to go somewhere. If the domestic market won't have it and the local export markets won't take it, they're going to look further afield. And unlucky for us, they have a deal with us. So, no tariffs, no quotas. That's what's going to happen here. So Langford has every right to be concerned, especially because the government will happily throw farmers under the bus. In fact, they have thrown farmers under the bus. So congratulations, guys. You played yourselves. So a DIT spokesperson said the UK's highly competitive sugar sector is one of the best in the world. We're not highly competitive, though. That's the thing. When the UK sugar industry is not highly competitive, if it was, it wouldn't be propped up by quotas and subsidies and tariffs. We wouldn't need any of those things. We would have been able to stand on our own two and export it wherever. But that's simply not the case. These farmers are terrified. And this spokesperson is like, the sector is one of the best in the world. It's simply not the case. It doesn't make any sense to make that statement. We've always been clear that we have red lines in our trade negotiations. Yeah, those red lines are when the other side say, okay, we're not going to make a deal. And then you're like, wait, come back, we'll sort it out. And you capitulate. That's your red line, which ensure UK goods are defended from unfair competition. Well, you didn't do that in the Australia deal. You're not going to do that on any other potential future trade deals, because you guys are desperate for optics wins. You don't care about substance. That's the main problem. And so these farmers are going to get absolutely decimated, and it's going to really do damage to the environment as well, as we're more reliant on imports from countries that are sort of not just in Europe, but down under. Australia's very far away. I think it might be more further than Bangladesh, which is crazy, considering they're going to export a lot of stuff to us, which is going to do a lot of damage to the environment. But congratulations to the farmers. Well done. You played yourselves again. Are you going to do anything about it? Answer is probably no. So congratulations. You're just going to sit there and, you're going to hit with that Nelson stop. He's already dead. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.